Hello.
Hello.
That's right. It is YouTube time this time, all the time.
If you like poetry, if you like literature, if you like cultural history, then you've come to the right place. We make podcasts about all of those things. So be sure to like and share this video. And of course, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload.
Since we mostly make podcasts, you can also find our shows on all the major podcast platforms. So if you found this video, but YouTube isn't your speed for regular podcast listening, head over to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe there.
All right. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to Close Talking, the world's most popular poetry analysis podcast from Cardboard Box Productions Incorporated. I am co-host Jack Rossiter Munley.
And I am your other co-host, Connor McNamara Stratton.
And together we read a poem,
talk about the poem,
and read the poem again.
Before we get into today's selection, a quick note that if you like what we do here at Close Talking and have a spare moment, it would mean the world to us if you drop a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Those reviews help boost us up the algorithm and are a great way for us to find new listeners.
If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on so many different social medias.
On Twitter, the show is at Close Talking. I am at Jack Rossiter Munn, and Connor is at Connor M. Stratton.
On Instagram, the show is at Close Talking Poetry. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/Close Talking.
We also have a whole website just for the podcast. It is closetalking.com, where you can find all the past episodes of the show. And Cardboard Box Productions has a newsletter, Unboxed. So if you go to cardboardboxproductionsinc.com, you can subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stuff on Close Talking and on all the literary and cultural history podcasts that Cardboard Box Productions makes.
All right, on with the show. Hello and welcome to yet another special episode of Close Talking. I'm one of your co-hosts, Connor McNamara Stratton.
And I'm your other co-host, Jack Rossiter Munley. And it's day 3 here in Haiku Week.
Day 3, which is a great day. And you know why it's a great day? Because we're talking about one of Close Talking's all-time favorite things, which is the break.
So yesterday in our episode about syllables, we were talking about how haiku does not have to subscribe to the strict 5-7-5, 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, 5 syllables in the third line rules, which got me thinking. So here's the thing. I think part of the reason that this captures people's imagination and is part of the reason that haiku is so widely taught is because this is such a quick and firm rule to teach that definitively says to somebody, you are writing a haiku. It is this number of syllables and this number of lines. Again, more on the lines later. How do you know what a haiku is if you don't have this rule? It strikes me that you're going to get into when the Supreme Court decided Jacob Ellis v. Ohio, and we're just like, obscenity? Well, I hesitate to define it, but I know it when I see it. Do you just know a haiku when you see it? What makes it a haiku at that point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I don't really have a great answer, and I don't think many people do, but there are some definitions, I think, that I've found that I think account a little better for the variability while still capturing the short essence of the haiku, which I think is still, which the 5-7-5 aspires to. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this I'm getting from this great book that I picked up actually at #AWP19 from the lovely AWP that was in Portland this year, which was actually the first time that me and Jack were in the same room in a long time. I picked up this book published by New Directions Press. It's called On Haiku. It's by Hiroki Sato, and he's one of the sort of most preeminent translators of haiku. And it's a wonderful book, very digressive. He's got a lot of hot takes some cold takes, very thorough takes, and it's pretty excellent. But he sort of is talking about this, what is a haiku if not the 575? And there are kind of two definitions that he came up with that he kind of liked. One is a one-line poem, and he really loves the one line. We're going to get to that. He says, a one-line poem with two main descriptive elements that can't be divided into lines. That's what he likes. Other definitions that are good. The haiku is composed of 2, 3, or 4 short phrases. However, the length of each such short phrase can't be regulated or restricted. The Haiku Society of America has some opinions about it, which Sato does not really like, but at any rate, they define it as an unrhymed Japanese poem recording the essence of a moment keenly perceived, in which nature is linked to human nature. It usually consists of 17 onji, which is something similar to syllables. So with that, hard to say. But I think one thing that is for sure is that there is a kind of, we talk a lot about turns. And I think this is what's true about haiku, is that there is always a kind of turn. And the beauty of a haiku, I think, is often that there's this, it's like the haiku is at once kind of one thought, but then there's this weird turn that's in the middle of the one thought. And that kind of tension between this two and one, but still being one. At least when I read haiku, that's kind of like the first place that I start to sort of get at it. And I know, Jack, that one of your favorite haiku, I think, has that kind of going on.
It does. And I think part of what the turn, and this might just be by necessity because the poem is so short, but it feels to me like the turn that happens in a haiku almost always reflects directly back at what the first two lines are saying. It's not a turn where you get to something that's completely different. It's something that is intended to reframe what just happened almost every time. And yes, one of my favorite haiku, which is a fairly well-known one, is one by Kobayashi Isa, which is, "Don't worry, spiders, I keep house casually," which I love the sentiment of, and any poem that starts off by addressing our eight-legged brethren who are just out there trying to keep the insect populations down, I appreciate. But yeah,
Yeah,
I like that one.
that's such a good one.
And at least for me, when I'm identifying something as a haiku, my own personal definition has always been a short poem with a big turn, basically.
Yeah.
And this concept of a cutting word or a cutting phrase that really, at some point in the poem, severs what's been happening and changes the direction has always been key to the haiku, but I think more so than any syllable counting or line counting is essential to the nature of the form, and also more so than the somewhat pedantic description from the Haiku Society about nature and such.
Yeah. No, that's really true. And yeah, so that Isa haiku, "Don't worry, spiders" is kind of like the first line in one translation of it, which does have 5 syllables. But then "I keep house casually," and in this translation, "casually" is kind of the third line. Those clearly don't have. That's like 3 syllables and then 3 syllables, so it's much shorter than that 575. Yet the turn and that the phrase cutting word that you use, that's really important. There's a word for that cutting word, which is often, I think it's kireji. And that sort of, yeah. And it feels like casually is kind of maybe that word actually at the end, would you say? Because there's this kind of joke, it's like he's trying to consoling the spiders, and then he's talking about how he keeps house, but it's casually, so they don't have to worry because he doesn't really clean up his house that much, so he's not going to get rid of the spiders. But it's this kind of thing where the moment that makes it the kind of joke doesn't happen until casually comes.
What I think also happens with the injection of casually is that it turns it into a reflection on the nature of the person writing, the speaker. And it makes it a statement about who they are as a person. And so it starts off, don't worry, spiders, I keep house. That could go any number of directions. It could continue to just console the spiders, or like, I keep house for you. I keep house to make you safe or something. It could be more, I mean, those would be way too direct as the actual end. But by saying I keep house casually, it turns into this philosophical statement from the speaker about how they want to exist in the world and what kind of environment they want to create for themselves, where maybe they don't want spiders in their home, but they'd prefer that the spiders be at ease in their space as well than worry about trying to keep a super neat and tidy house, which I really like.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and then, that short one, I cough and am still alone, the break there happens after I cough. And it's interesting because I feel like it works in that the "and am still alone" suggests that the action of whatever came before it might help alleviate aloneness, and yet immediately you're like, what would coughing have to do with it, kind of thing. It's like, it's sort of a very disjunctive set of tones where it's like, I cough, it's the most mundane thing you could ever describe about yourself, except for I breathe, maybe, is slightly more mundane. And then am still alone is like so weighted, with something: existential despair, isolation, sadness, longing. Maybe it's a cough to get the attention of someone. That doesn't work. I don't know. But even though it doesn't have that 5-7-5, the pairing and that kind of like the one sentence, I cough and am still alone, but with that turn embedded in it, seems to make the kind of haiku happen.
Absolutely.
Spotting Brooklyn blossoms from the plains, a snowless white as snow.
The air is cold with pine. Or is it juniper? And does it matter?
Of raven pines for the needle to move on the sun's seething hot reply.
A long walk and a quick stop. Cold chocolate spring.
No one else likes sweet tang, chocolate chips, orange sherbet, solitude.
The man on the train says Romulus killed his brother. A long way from 6 a.m.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Those reviews help us with the algorithm and are the best way for us to find new listeners.
Do you have thoughts about this poem? Or is there a poem or poet you'd like us to cover on a future episode? We would love to hear from you, and there are tons of ways to get in touch.
Yes, you can send us an email to closetalkingpoetry@gmail.com or find us on Twitter. I'm at Jack Rossiter Munn, Connor is at Connor M. Stratton, and the show is at Close Talking.
On Instagram, we are at Close Talking Poetry, and we are on Facebook at facebook.com/closetalking.
And speaking of all of those many and varied social media platforms, a very special thank you to our incredible social media manager, Corey Chena. Woo woo! Woo.
Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Come back again.
Please come back just one more time.
Door's always open. Okay, bye.
See ya.